Our next guest is Nir Barkat, the mayor of Jerusalem. And you should appreciate the fact that Mr. Barkat is here with us today. Not only is Jerusalem Day coming up very soon, but today is the finals in soccer in which Beitar Jerusalem will be playing against Hapoel Haifa. He was a company commander in the paratroopers. He was the first CEO of Checkpoint and the developers of an antivirus. He's also a social entrepreneur, and he established a series of organizations and was involved in the development of projects in the area of community and society and other things. And among other things, he advanced the holistic project, the creation of local leadership and local organizations in Jerusalem. In the past 10 years, he has served as mayor of Jerusalem, one of the most complicated cities in the world. Recently, in March 2008, he announced that he will not run for a third term as mayor and that he plans to run in the Likud list for a seat in the Knesset. I have the honor of calling upon Mayor Nir Barkat. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. I will continue in the spirit of the introduction. I'd like to wish a great deal of success to Beitar Jerusalem this evening and to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you at the conference. I'd like to thank and congratulate Professor Yafa Zilberschatz and Professor Uriel Reichman, the president and founder of the IDC, and Major General Amos Gilad, the chairman of the Herzliya conference, and everyone, distinguished guests. I think, if I'm not mistaken, this is an historic week in the city of Jerusalem, an especially moving one. On Monday, I went to hang up the sign that will direct those looking for the embassy in the Arnona neighborhood in Jerusalem. And I thought to myself at the time about the huge changes, almost inconceivable changes that are occurring in the Middle East and in Israel, and especially in Jerusalem. And I would like to present a very sharp approach. President Trump arrived at the understanding that President Obama's foreign policy not only collapsed and was proven to be completely unacceptable, the attempt to find favor and to try to appease Iran, the unwillingness and reluctance to confront them, even when it was necessary, that approach of let's try to be good to the bad guys, it does not hold water. Because if anything, we understand that in the Middle East, during Obama's term, the Iranians grew stronger, the axis of evil grew stronger, and the good guys in the neighborhood became weaker. That approach is completely opposed to the logic of the Middle East. It worked against our interests of the State of Israel and placed the friends of the U.S. in a state of conflict, not only us, all U.S. allies in the Middle East. It wasn't clear who the good guys and the bad guys are anymore, and the result followed soon after: chaos, confusion among America's allies, and in fact, it strengthened, as I said, the evil axis. President Trump took a 180 degrees turn, created a clear policy that absolutely supports the U.S. allies in the region, in other words, Israel, and placed an iron wall against the axis of evil. I think last night's decision, which was obvious to me, to withdraw from the agreement demonstrates very clearly that there is a new order in the Middle East. And truth be told, this has been the consistent policy of our Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, vis-a-vis our neighbors as well as internally in the state of Israel. A very simple policy that says our goal is to be good to the good ones and bad to the bad guys. It is a policy that creates order in the relationships in the region, and over time, when you are consistent with this policy, there's a very clear differentiation. Look what's happening in the Middle East. The Arabs who are in the best situation in the Middle East are the Arabs who are citizens of the State of Israel. Their status is far better than other Arabs in the region. On the other side, the other extreme, the haters of Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, ISIS, the more they hate us and the more they fight us, their situation becomes worse. In the Middle East, we can look at the relationship with Egypt, with Jordan. Perhaps the situation could be a lot better, but it could also be a lot worse. There's a clear correlation. A very clear correlation with a hint, the more you cooperate with us, we will be very happy to see your situation improve significantly. There is a historic window of opportunity to set new rules of the game in the Middle East, to expand cooperations with all the moderates in the Middle East, and to expand and widen the iron wall against the radicals. This very simple approach of being good to the good guys and bad to the bad guys, that has been my approach in Jerusalem as mayor for the past 10 years. And many people have asked me, why is it so quiet all of a sudden in Jerusalem at a time when it should be very, very tumultuous? There were many naysayers and doomsayers who said that Jerusalem would be ignited in a new wave of violence because of the processes that are occurring. So I would like to explain to you that, at least as far as I am concerned, there is a very deep internalization on the part of the residents of Eastern Jerusalem, some of whom arrived at it consciously and some unconsciously. The Arab residents of Jerusalem understand that something big is happening here, and they're asking themselves, who do I want to be like when I grow up? Do I want to resemble the Arab residents of the State of Israel, to be part of the State of Israel? Or do I want to resemble those that hate Israel? And I think the answer is very, very clear. In a process of many years, using that policy of being good to who's good and bad to those who are bad, over the years we have managed to make it clear why it's preferable to do good than to do bad. Moving the embassy next week, to me, that is like the movement of huge tectonic plates that are moving because of the fundamental changes in the U.S. foreign policy by President Trump. It's setting a direction, and if anybody has any doubts, I think everybody in the city, including the Arabs, understand that ultimately this will improve their quality of life, and there's no point in opposing it because the municipality, the government, and even from a broader perspective, it will do them no good. If I may take a brief pause and talk about my work as mayor. It's no secret that Jerusalem is undergoing a cultural sports renaissance with a growth in the population. Giro Italia last week was perhaps the cherry on top, and it took years with formula, with the marathons, with the various festivals, and our ability to produce such projects that enables us to grow. And the residents of East Jerusalem also are benefiting from the growth in services, in tourism, in hotels, jobs, and other jobs, and the positive branding of Jerusalem and the positive image that it is taking on, all the people of Jerusalem, including those in East Jerusalem, are benefiting from it. The policy of closing gaps in Eastern Jerusalem, in classrooms, in roads, in other infrastructures, as much as we can. We are increasing the budget of the city and increasing our investments proportionately, no less, even sometimes more, than in Western Jerusalem. We are fostering local leadership in the eastern neighborhoods as well. We respect them, we give them service, and thus we serve sovereignty everywhere where we receive cooperation from the residents of East Jerusalem. It's true that the level of services in the city, I can tell you that in East Jerusalem there are three main levels. There are neighborhoods like Beit Hanina, Tzur Bahar, Shuafat, and Vadi Joz. They're like any neighborhood in West Jerusalem in terms of our ability to provide services. They are safe neighborhoods, and there are a low level of building violations and so on. And then you have Isawiya, Natur, and other. There are more challenging neighborhoods. We have more security challenges there. And accordingly, the services are not as good. I wish they were better. And the third level is outside the fence. While the residents of the areas outside the fence get all the services, in light of the challenges, it's more difficult for us to provide those services. The point I'm trying to make with that same differentiation I mentioned earlier, that those who cooperate get a better quality of life, the same is true inside the city. Our message to the residents of East Jerusalem, the more you enable us to help you, the better the services you get will be. The conclusion is very clear. Everywhere we can make a change, generate greater cooperation, give better service and more sovereignty, ultimately those who benefit will be the residents of that neighborhood. And we're showing them that everywhere we can, where there is cooperation, we will respond with cooperation. And this policy is consistent with what I said earlier, being good to the good and bad to the bad. And it is not a matter of a controversy, this approach. All the members of the city council unanimously, all 31 members, realize that when the Arab residents of Jerusalem have it good, it will be good for everyone. They're undergoing a process of Israelization. Remember when I asked earlier about who they want to resemble? I'd like to give you a few examples. There's a considerable growth in requests on the part of residents of East Jerusalem to get Israeli citizenship. We're seeing more and more students doing the Israeli matriculation rather than the Palestinian matriculation exams. Used to be just a few hundred in the past. Now there's many more, and I'm encouraging them all the time. You have the option of choosing Israeli matriculations. Now we have 6,000 students, and the Mufti of Jerusalem issued a fatwa not to study the Israeli matriculation, and 500 more joined this past year. So I'm not talking about the religious aspect. You know, they're Muslims or Christians, but mostly Muslims. And perhaps in their identity, they're Palestinians. But when you ask them, what are you first, a Muslim, a Palestinian, or a Jerusalemite? They are first Jerusalemites. And the process of Israelization, which the eastern side is undergoing, is a welcome process that is moving very fast. And I maintain that this window of opportunity in the Middle East, American support, the leadership of the Prime Minister, and the facts and work on the ground, which is based on a philosophy, is bringing wonderful results.
When we united Jerusalem, we are now truly uniting between the neighborhoods and the actual residents, the creating of this motivation of conveying a message of cooperate, and then the future of your children will be so much better. This message comes from an issue of true values, and it is achieving and wonderful results. I'd like to tell you something that you don't hear often in the news when they talk about the local leadership of Jerusalem, the following. First of all, they say, we feel that you care about us. You talk about us as part of this town. You care about us. We want to work with you. And they say something in additional. The left-wingers of Israel do not represent us. They want to put us beyond the fence. They don't care about us. We want better quality of life for our children. We don't want that kind of disconnection. So they say the left-wingers and perhaps Obama is in an ideological conflict. On one hand, they believe in the upgrading of the individual's way of life in Jerusalem. But the more we do a better job, the actual residents of the east side want to be part of Jerusalem, while the right-wingers, which I believe in upgrading the life of the individuals in the east side of the city. And the more we do that, their motivation is that of Israelization, and that's part, and that really tallies with our strategy. But the left-wingers have a kind of conflict in what they do and what they say, and the right-wingers do. They actually accept it and internalize that, and that is what they believe in. The policy creates a trend that fixates Jerusalem as a united, connecting, embracing city, and we want the satisfaction, the contentment of the Arab residents to the level of the Arab residents of the State of Israel, and no longer will there be a partition in Jerusalem. It is achievable. It is something that can be achieved, which actually makes it incumbent upon us to continue enabling the residents of Jerusalem to really be able to grapple with those and contend with those who are sort of have their sort of evil thoughts in mind. Now, what did we do when we had a peak of violence and terror a few years ago? I remember, and for those who do remember, that peak of terror, there was basically, we didn't even know why it was happening. There was no reason, but it was basically because of instigation and incitement of people who wanted to create this sort of lack of order and a lack of control in the Temple Mount and other places. So we wanted to see how could we actually mobilize the local leadership. So what we did is created barriers in the town, and we said that if the violence emanates from you in your neighborhoods, then there's no alternative. You're going to have those barriers, and we succeeded in harnessing the citizens of the east side of the town to actually help us. And we realized that we have to work truly with tweezers and pinpoint the troublemakers, and alongside the improvement in economy, in their economy. And of course, after all, when rain falls, it rains on all of them. We'll be able to slowly sort things out. I'd like to end on a note of optimism. The dynamics created in Jerusalem and in Israel in general is a window of opportunity that we need to take advantage of. The policy is swift and clear, and if you look behind us, we can see all those successes in a trail behind. So I'm leaving perhaps my role as mayor of Jerusalem, but I will never abandon those principles and values that I mentioned, and I will not leave Jerusalem either. And I am ensuring that it will, whoever my successor is, he will see how this has continued.